Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just watched The Boys season 2. Let's talk about it. So season 2 of The Boys has finally come to an end, and after this highly anticipated second season, we definitely got some huge reveals, some huge twists in the season finale, which we'll be diving into in this review. Be warned that this is going to be a spoiler review where I'm going to be discussing my thoughts on the season as a whole. But if you do want to check out my thoughts on the first part of the season, I did do a review for the first 3 episodes when they were released at once. Those are the good old days when they were released at once at the beginning. So you can definitely check out my review on those episodes if you would like to. And before we dive into my review of the season overall, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure that you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload a new video. Okay, without further ado, let's get into the bundle of noise that is my thoughts on this season. As I mentioned, I think it's fair to say that this was one of the most highly anticipated seasons of television for the entire year, and this is certainly one of Amazon Prime's most popular series that they've come out with as of yet. So the stakes were incredibly high for the second season after the huge shock of the first season being so good. So incredible. People definitely went into this second season with some expectations that didn't exist when they went into the first season. As a result, the show ended up losing its element of surprise factor, and it had to offer up a ton more stuff for us to get excited over. And on top of that, you have the weekly release schedule. Taking all of this into account, do I think that the second season of The Boys was as good, if not better, than the first? Not quite. I think the second season of The Boys was excellent. I think it's an incredible season of television for any other show. But when it comes to the standards of this series specifically, whilst I think there were some things that were done better this time around, there were also some things that were lost in the second season, which we'll be going through as well. But first off, let's start off with the good. And the first thing that comes to mind when I think of the best parts of this series is Anthony Starr's Homelander. No. There is no question. This man was born to play this role. It is incredible. Every single episode, he was on point. Every single line he delivered with menace, with complexity, perfection. Like, it was literally a sight to behold. Wow. He is so suited for this role. He reminds me of like how Robert Downey Jr. is perfect for Iron Man, or how Ryan Reynolds was born to play Deadpool. Like, he is just so suited for the role of Homelander that it's crazy. And whilst this cast in general is amazing, and especially you have the addition of Aya Cash, who was incredible as Stormfront, Anthony Starr's Homelander is just on a different level. He is able to walk on that incredibly fine line of him being completely irredeemable and us hating him outright, us as being a character that we love to hate. Like, he's deliciously evil, as opposed to Aya Cash's Stormfront, who is just downright, she has to die immediately in the most painful way possible, which we'll get to. But just off the bat, I think Homelander is a golden character. He's an MVP character. In fact, I should have featured him in my video of MVP TV show characters, because he's definitely one of them. But speaking of Stormfront, we did get the addition of this superhero character this season, and it was quite a journey. I think out of all of these story arcs that they explored in this season, the Homefront story was phenomenal. When we were first introduced to this character, we were convinced that she was this, leftist SJW speaking up against the man. She was standing up for her fellow female superheroes, and we were loving it. Like, we were loving the fact that she was standing up to Vought. We were loving the fact that she was going against the machine and refusing to be another clog in the machine, unlike the others in the 7. And I did mention in my review of episodes 1 to 3 that I didn't quite trust her. I thought something was off about this character. I think she was trying too hard to get us on her side, and it turns out that I was right, but for way worse reasons. Not only does she end up being not just a plant, but she ends up being a full-on Nazi, a full-on Nazi. And there were definitely some not so subtle clues as to her personal ideology and how that conflicted with the ideology that she was spreading at the beginning of the series to her audience. It was definitely effectively communicated that this character had a deep-seated hatred for other races and that she believed in the Aryan race and creating this, final solution of her own in the form of creating superheroes that would presumably all be Aryan and they would kind of take over the world, I guess. Like, I don't know what her plan was, but I didn't even want to speak to it because it was despicable. And I loved, oh my goodness, in the finale, I loved that scene that she had with Ryan and Homelander. It was one of the best scenes in the finale where she's trying to explain to Ryan that there is a war that needs to be fought and that's why it's necessary for him to have hatred. She's trying to instill a sense of hatred into him. In her mind, the war that she's referring to is the war on the Aryan race. And I love the fact that Homelander's just like, like, you had me there in the first half. That was an incredible scene. That whole scene was just so well constructed because it was a very personal scene. It didn't feel very showy. It didn't feel exaggerative. The conversation felt very organic. And at the same time, you could see Homelander trying to bond with his son. And he was really trying to get close to Ryan and really open up to what Ryan and his relationship could be in the future. But at the same time, in that small moment, we saw Homelander doubt Stormfront and start to question her ideology. Anyways, like I said, this all connected to Stormfront's overall Nazi plan, and I thought that her story arc was absolutely fascinating and very well executed. And again, the actress was amazing as this character because she led us down this whole journey of being this leftist SJW to just outright being a Nazi, like just outright being a Nazi. And even she said herself that whilst the people who were going against her when they found out the truth about her origins were shouting and yelling and saying that they hated her, they still agreed with her ideology. It's just that as soon as you label it as Nazism, that's when they flee. Speaking of the people, this is a huge theme and has a huge presence in this series as per usual. We already know that Vought and therefore the Seven are heavily focused on their image. They are obsessed with their image because at the end of the day, Vought is always looking out for its bottom line and it wants to keep its investors happy, so it will do anything that it can to do so, and that largely involves public relations and making sure that everyone is on board. But Stormfront kind of shakes things up a little bit because she doesn't abide by the same rules that the other seven do at the beginning of the season, and indeed in the previous season. She changes things up. She utilizes social media in a very novel way, at least for the seven, and as a result she's able to create this polarity that we haven't yet seen before in this world. Because in season one, everyone seemed to be harmoniously on board with the idea of superheroes and how they're, gods on earth, how they're all destined to save humanity and should therefore be treated as such. But in this season, there was a lot of doubts thrown into that because we had the revelation of Compound V thanks to Starlight and Huey. We also saw Homelander and his collateral damage and the fact that he had this dismissal of life on screen. Not enough of a big deal was made about that, by the way, in my opinion. These factors, as well as some others that were explored in this season, just helped to create some doubt over this divine image that the seven had amassed. And so Vought really had to work hard in order to reshape the dialogue surrounding their heroes and to keep their bottom line and their investors happy. What I really appreciated about this season is that it wasn't just enough for this series to explore, the impact of social media and these celebrity-like figures and how they manipulate social media. But no, it decided to take it one step further and explore the way that social media can be used to create these huge chasms in society, these huge divisions amongst people. And here we see that being utilized brilliantly, expertly almost, by Stormfront, and it's kind of a lesson in the outrage economy. I found this to be absolutely fascinating. The idea that you can use outrage, anger, hatred on both sides in order to profit, in order to benefit, in order to gain more power over people. She's made it clear that she's not interested in having everybody love her in the way that Homelander is obsessed with, but rather she just wants a few million people who are absolutely devoted, rabid with rage, for them to act as soldiers to stand up to any cause that she wants them to. I wish I could say that this was far-fetched. I wish I could say that this was novel and something that we've never seen before, but we have seen the outrage economy blossom in at least the last 5 years. I mean, it's every single day that we see people arguing on Twitter, on Instagram. Seemingly no one seems to share any common ground anymore, and that is by design. I mean, if you've watched The Social Dilemma on Netflix, I would highly recommend you watch it. It is a fascinating insight into what social media is actually doing to our society, and what having these cookies follow us around and take note of all of our preferences actually does to our minds and our perception of the world. I would highly recommend you check out The Social Dilemma. I think it's a good double bill to have season 2 of The Boys and watch The Social Dilemma, because it just informs you so much of what's going on online and how that's impacting the real world. Whilst we explore the power of social media and the outrage economy and how anger and hatred are commodified by huge corporations and politicians through the character of Stormfront, you also saw this theme explored from a different angle through the character of Victoria Newman, who ended up being the infamous head popper. It just presumes that it had been that girl who had escaped from Vort's lab that had been doing all of this, but it turns out that it was Victoria Newman, and actually in hindsight this is kind of genius, because Victoria Newman throughout the season has been presented as an Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez type politician. The way that she was presented to us was very left-wing. She was for the people, she had the people on side, so it made it even more shocking when it was revealed that in the end she was a soup herself. But not only that, she had been responsible for the deaths in the House of the Representatives. I have 2 theories surrounding why it is that she might be doing this. The first one relates to the outrage economy and the idea that Vought is actually controlling her and has been behind all of this, as she said herself in the finale of the episode, where she was talking to that senator, I believe, and she was explaining to him that Vought was behind the deaths in the House of Representatives. She was right, except she happened to be the gun that they used and they were pulling the trigger. I think it would be absolutely genius if it was revealed that Stan Edgar decided not only to control the right side of the political spectrum, but also the left. Like, that to me would be such a powerful move, because like I said before, Vought has always been about protecting its public image. It has always been about controlling the public discourse surrounding the company, its commodities, its products. And so it makes complete sense that not only would they resort to taking in a Nazi in the form of Stormfront in order to control the dialogue and the discourse on the right side of things, but also they would use Victoria to control the narrative in the left side of the political spectrum. That, it's just genius. Of course it makes perfect sense, because like I said, these companies flourish when there is polarization, and so it makes perfect sense that while you have a character like Stormfront who is galvanizing a right-wing army, you also have a character like Victoria who is building her own army on the left side of the political spectrum, whilst also gaining a coveted position as the head of a brand new department that's supposed to monitor soups, the commodities that Vought control. Mwah. Absolutely perfect. And my second theory surrounding this character would be that she's working alone and she's not actually affiliated with Vought, but I'm more convinced by the first theory, if anything, just because it makes sense thematically. Another thing that I think this season did very, very well was delivering on its promise from the end of the first season by allowing us to explore the relationship between Homelander, Billy, Becca, and Ryan. Wow, that storyline was also so entertaining. It was so fascinating to see Homelander try and build a genuine relationship with his son. At the beginning, I was very skeptical about his intentions when it came to Ryan. It seemed as though he was trying to give him the same tough love that he experienced growing up. But then by the end there, like, am I crazy, or did he become a sympathetic character? At the end, you see a genuine attempt from him to be a father figure, to teach his son what he knows and what he had to learn the hard way, and to actually try and give his son a better life than he had. I think it was pretty adorable. Again, like Anthony Starr, he walks that very fine line with the character of Homelander, and the writers do as well, and I think it was quite effective, at least until the very end there, where we had that complication. Okay, so let's talk about Becca's death, because I genuinely said out loud when I saw Ryan's little red beady eyes start to glow that if he ends up killing his mother, this finale would have been leveled up entirely. It reminded me of a a previous episode where you see Homelander talking in front of a crowd and he's contemplating just lasering them all down, and I kind of wish that he had done that, although again that would have tilted him towards being irredeemable, and so I understand why the writers didn't do that. It would have been so cool if they had though. But anyways, this reminds me of that episode, and when I saw that he ended up actually killing his mother, like, to me that just took things to a whole different level, because what other show would do that? Literally, what other show would do that? There is none. Like, that was such a unique The Boys moment, and I can't wait to see how they explore the after effects of that. I'm hoping that Ryan doesn't become a raging psychopath, but who knows? I mean, now we've gone from a character who's super powerful but didn't grow up with any parental influence or any show of love, to a character who had that love but took it away himself. Like, he killed his own mother. Like, that could be so much worse. When it comes to the Ryan and Homelander side of this quartet, I thought that the story there was explored very, very well, but I did take issue with the other half, and that being the Billy and Becca side of things. First of all, okay, we're going to dive into some of the conveniences of this season that kind of made it feel a little less smooth, a little less convincing than season 1. But one huge convenience that I had to point out from the finale was Becca was able to escape so easily. The whole point of her being trapped in that idyllic neighborhood was that she was going to be there for the foreseeable future. She wasn't able to go anywhere else, and they were monitoring her to ensure that Ryan grew up to be usable as a contingency plan, basically. Like, that's what Stan Edgar cared about. He didn't care about if Ryan grew up to be a good person, just someone who could be used just in case Homelander ended up, you know, going off the rails. So the fact that it was so easy for her to just jump ship like that, like, we saw a few scenes of her hiding in the trees. But other than that, it seems so easy for her to escape. Like, you're telling me in like the 10 years that Ryan has been alive, I don't know exactly how old he is, but she never attempted what she did? Like, she never tried to escape with Ryan, who has superpowers? Aside from that, what really irked me about this duo in this quartet, as I said before, is that her and Billy's relationship is just so messy. Like, I couldn't even get behind it, if I'm being honest, because we've seen this time and time again where male-led stories have the motivation of, you know, saving their woman. Like, I need to save my daughter, or I need to save my wife, or whatever. So we see that Billy was angered by what happened to his wife, and that kind of drove him to hate Soups, although it is revealed in this season that perhaps he had another reason that was very deep-seated in him to hate Soups, but I digress. That was definitely a motivating factor for his hatred of Homelander specifically, because of what happened to his wife. And yeah, we've seen this time and time again where something horrible, tragic happens to the wife, and so the husband goes and gets his revenge. Like, this is something that we see all the time. But I wouldn't feel as resigned or as disappointed if the relationship ended up feeling like worth it. If I actually felt like their marriage was a good one and that they had a healthy relationship. But actually, I couldn't help but think, well, why would she go back to Billy? Like, he sucks. He was literally willing to give up her son, her blood, to Stan Edgar, the devil, so that he could have his happily ever after with his wife. That's wasn't really rooting for their relationship to begin with. I didn't really buy them as a healthy couple, because Billy, like, his hatred of Soups is just on a whole other level, to a point where he would expect his wife to just get back together with him, have a happily ever after, even though her son has been held hostage by Vought. What? Having said that, I was happy to see Billy make the right choice at the end there and decide to look out for Ryan instead of killing him on the spot for what he did to his wife. And so I have hope that maybe in season 3 we'll get a little bit more of that side of the character, because this season he became quite unbearable. I've spoken a lot about walking that fine line of likability and redemption, and Billy was teetering on the opposite side a lot in this season for me. As we're already diving into some of the aspects of the season that I didn't love quite as much, let's just do a quick rundown of some of the things that I wasn't a huge fan of. We'll try and keep it short and sweet so that this review won't be 10 hours long. Alright, so first of all, Queen Maeve, her storyline wasn't my favorite. I understood the way that they were discussing and exploring the idea of the commodification of her sexuality and how the company was trying to sell it to people and brand her as this LGBTQ icon despite her own wishes, which was again very anti-LGBTQ. They outed her, at least Homelander did, to the public without her consent. Like, it was actually a traumatic experience, but then they were trying to make money off of her through this. So I completely understand what they were going for there, but I think at the same time the show did a disservice to this LGBT character by not giving her much to do throughout the season. Secondly, we have A-Train. I wasn't terribly impressed with this character this season. He didn't feel necessary. He was kind of pushed to the side, or at least pushed to the Church of the Collective where all the characters go to die, basically, or at least pause until the next season, because there really wasn't much for him to do here. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that even though this show presents itself as a series that is trying to undercut and deconstruct the superhero genre and kind of go against a lot of the tropes that we see in the superhero genre, both on television and in film, they kind of perpetuated the trope of having the black side characters who kind of do nothing other than serve their white masters, because A-Train doesn't do much, right? But then we also have the character of MM, who especially doesn't do much. He has one episode where they're going on that road trip with Huey and Starlight, and he has quite a prominent presence there. But other than that, he's a bit of an absent character, and I think it's a shame, especially for a show that makes such a big deal of being anti-Nazi and anti-right-wing. At the same time, I can't help but feel like they're not as progressive as they think they are, because they're perpetuating some of these very same tropes in cinema. And I can't even say I'm terribly surprised after that shocking moment where Homelander made that Asian Daredevil character not only blind but also deaf. Like, that was just absolutely horrendous. I think it was actually a step too far, because to do this to an Asian character, like, we were out here thinking, oh, they're gonna introduce an Asian character, oh my goodness, that's amazing, that's progressive, that's, oh, I see. That to me was really disappointing, even though it was thematically in line with what this show explores. Another character that joined A-Train in the character development purgatory that was the Church of the Collective was the Deep. Again, I was super disappointed with the way that the Deep was handled this season. Again, at the beginning of the season, I had hope because of that cute little duet that he had with Patton Oswalt as his gills. But as we went on, he just had less and less to do. He didn't go through any significant character moments. We didn't even get to see him in action much this season. And I think worst of all, it seems as though his little detour to the Church of the Collective may have only been there to present as a kind of key moment, a little nudge to the Church of Scientology. Other than that, after the death of Alistair, I wonder if we're going to be exploring the church in any real depth in the coming season, because if not, that would have been a huge waste of time. Though at the end, we do see that the Deep is rejected from the Seven, so it is possible that he may end up being a leader of the Church of the Collective since he has nothing else to do. And next, even though I was a huge fan of the themes and the ideas that they explored this season, I would have to criticize a little bit the delivery in some parts. I thought that some of Stormfront's rhetoric was so over the top. I mean, I think this sort of thing works best when there's a little bit of nuance, a little bit of obscurity. And in this case, there wasn't much of that in a lot of her rhetoric, especially at the end of the season. There was no subtlety there. It was very heavy-handed, in my opinion, and so there were moments where I felt a little bit cringeworthy. Another criticism that I would have for this season was the way that they used the boys themselves. I was actually quite disappointed with what the boys got up to this season. It seems as though that they didn't have the sauce, they didn't have the spice that the Seven have, and I really think at this point, all that's left to do is give them compound V's, give them superpowers so that they become the thing that they hate the most. That would be a really interesting angle to explore in season 3 or 4, and I really hope they go in that direction, because at this point I was really disappointed. We didn't even get a boss moment from them. Like at the end in the finale, I was expecting the RPG to go off and actually take down Stormfront, to at least give them that. But instead we didn't even get that moment. And speaking of the takedown of Stormfront, I also wasn't a huge fan of the way that the ladies, you know, the women get it done, or the girls get it done. They ended up just kicking her repeatedly. Apparently it was kind of a spoof on the kind of girls get it done moment in Avengers Endgame, which a lot of people had issues with. I personally didn't, because we don't have enough moments like that in cinema history, but I digress. I personally found it disappointing that even though we had Kimiko, we had Maeve, we had Annie, all these great superpowers, all they ended up doing was just kicking her repeatedly. And even if it is in the comics, I don't care. I wanted something of a spectacle. I wanted them to fight with the full force of their powers. I wanted Annie to utilize that energy boost from that RPG and actually get the job done. Because one of the things that I really wanted to see in season 2 was more team ups amongst these superheroes and actually seeing them in action. And I think once again this season I was left a little bit underwhelmed on that front. Overall, I had a great time watching season 2 of The Boys. I very much enjoyed seeing these characters once again, especially Homelander, and I thought that the new additions to the cast, especially Homefront, were absolutely phenomenal, absolutely amazing. But at the same time, I think overall, when I think back to all of the issues that I had with this season, I think they're all symptomatic of the bigger issue, which is that this show has so many characters, so many great characters that are honestly deserving of their own show. But in this show, it feels so overly crowded, and it feels like a lot of these characters aren't really done justice. Like I said, that's particularly the case for the Deep, for A-Train, for MM, for Frenchie even. And also we had the introduction of Lamplighter, who was a great character. He ended up being so cool, but we lost him far too soon. So this overabundance of great characters creates a situation where a lot of them aren't explored in any real depth, and so they end up being wasted, and it's quite unfortunate because you get invested in them and then they're ripped away from you. So with all of that said, I'm going to be giving season 2 of The Boys a 7.5 out of 10. So that's it from me. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on The Boys season 2, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this season down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.